I'm Jesse Christopher from Valiantis. Today I'm going to talk about Jira Data Center Core installed via Helm Charts and distributed from an Azure infrastructure as a service environment. A lot of people aren't aware that Jira Data Center can be installed via Helm Charts, leveraging an Atlassian repository and accessed over the internet. It's serviced by a Kubernetes cluster service with multiple nodes and presented completely by infrastructure as a service, thus saving clients a lot more money, not having to pay for bare metal installs or VMs or footprints into data centers and things like that. This is also to say that these nodes, these Kubernetes nodes, can be scaled up and down in a matter of seconds in order to accommodate more and less users automatically. You can also do it manually, take it up, take it down, depending on how many users you're accessing at that time, depending on how much money you want to spend as well. Kind of the below concept that I have here is that we're going to set up some target infrastructure environment. I'm just going to briefly go through it. We're going to install Jira using Helm, and then we're going to verify the availability of Jira from the internet. So first thing you need to do is set up your primary infrastructure, which is comprised of a resource group, a VNet, some subnets within that VNet, and install a Postgres flexible server available from Azure as well. After that, you can create shared and local storage classes, which during the build out or the spin up, spin down, during build out, as well as spin up, spin down of other Jira nodes, you have to have the same shared volume or a local volume for the install directory using Jira. But we have to create the classes that Kubernetes will leverage as it spins more and less up down from its node pool. After creating the after adding the PostgreSQL server service from Azure, you're going to need to create a database on there as well. I've just selected Jira Prime as mine. I have a few different methodologies for doing that, whether you are doing it on your local machine in Linux and running pSQL, or maybe using PG4 admin or something like that. I can show you some of those. As I look at a PG server that I've created already over here in Azure, I can show you that as you connect to it, Azure gives you, the different methods you'd use to connect to this different one. You can use PG dump, PG bench, PG admin 4, dbeaver, any one of those. After creating the PostgreSQL server, you're going to need to create a storage account. The storage account will primarily, it's going to house and be able to shape your Kubernetes secret for accessing from Kubernetes cluster over to the backend database. This is some of the idea or some of the configuration items listed for that storage account. It's basically simple. There's not a lot to it. Once that storage account's created, once the storage account's created and the database is created, you have to create the Kubernetes secret, as I mentioned there. Kubernetes, there's the command line structure here to do it from your local machine into your Azure subscription. After that, the next step is creating a certificate manager and issuer within the Kubernetes cluster. In order to verify that after creation using a YAML manifest. AKS cluster, there it is. So here's just verification showing you the cert manager as it's listed in there, using that command line structure and that YAML file that I talked about. After that, you're going to need an ingress controller. It's also AKA known as a load balancer within the Kubernetes cluster. So next method, use this methodology. I found a very good deployment YAML that was already listed off of GitHub under the ingress Nginx area. I leveraged that and it came up perfect. In doing that, a way to verify it is to take a look at it. Here's the ingress Nginx controller after I created it from that YAML. As I look at it and it populates, This actually here is a good way to verify that you have your external public-facing IP, which we're going to use later in order to, log into Jira as necessary. Because we're using, we're not holding an actual DNS record on my local Windows box, I just created a host file and then set it to the Jira name or FQDN that I chose. Basically, that way I can type it into my browser and it'll reference the host file and go directly to that public IP address. And the next step after that, you have to add the Atlassian Helm chart repository. So this is to understand that you've already have Helm installed on your machine. I used PowerShell with Helm on my Windows box. Just added the Atlassian Data Center repository. What this does is it gives it access to all of the Helm charts for Atlassian, the different versions and the like. The next step is to acquire the values.yaml. The values YAML, as it comes down, what you get is a generic one with nothing in it. Well, I'm sorry, it's loaded with information as far as what to put here and how to configure it, and depending on what usage. But you have to populate it. An example of that, you can see here some of this other stuff that I have in mind, right? They give you information on instructions on how to do it. It's a rather long file. The bottom line is you have to go through every piece of this in order to configure it, because it references this update.yaml or values.yaml every time it builds a cluster, as well as spins up, spins down a node in order to understand what configuration. It's also referencing that Helm chart install that we're going to talk about next. So after you've got the YAML all set up and good to go, download it in your local directory, or I'm sorry, the values.yaml. This is the Helm install of a certain version. This one using Helm's version for Jira of 1.18.0. And then there's my, values YAML on my local machine. In order to verify the installation, so this is pretty much, it takes about a minute after it spins up in order to come back down, or in order to finish spinning up the nodes as necessary. But the best way to test it is actually to run this curl command here that references a backend. Now, keep in mind, this is running off of the ingress controller because you are already behind the public IP. So you're not referencing that public, that 4.0 that I showed you earlier. In this capacity, it's just saying this is the host name. Give me the secure address of the ingress controller or the cluster IP of the ingress controller, and it asks for a status of it. Here's the output of a successful test for that. You should get no 404s at the bottom line, no page not founds. It's rather long. I just scrolled down toward the bottom, or what I thought was the meat and potatoes of it, to give you guys an idea of what's happening there. But this is definitely a success. So now, another way to do it is to access the Jira installation over the ingress controller and complete the Jira database connectivity. So with this, provided that's successful with no errors, the site should be available at the DNS name you specified. For example, on mine, I used jira.cla jiracluster.io, navigated again to that host record, and then went on to it. That way I was able to connect to the fresh database and then start, spinning it up, and the Jira install completed. Here's some information on that. So afterward, after configuration, just to give you some ideas of how it works. So there I have the Jira cluster. Let's see what comes up. Oh, see, I'm already logged in. So, being insecure, it gave me the advance and proceed, and I had to click on it. But then I had already set up a username and password as I showed there. I just wanted to point this out, that these projects that I've added here, one of them is a Kanban software project with just base Jira. Another one's a Jira service management project. But on top of core, then you can start installing whatever you need on top of this. And so I just went in and messed around as much as I could to give an example of that, but it works basically the same. As far as accessing later, I also created a jump server over into my Azure environment. The way I did that is you can go through the instructions to set up your own Ubuntu VM, but I built an Ubuntu VM. Then I set up a backend tunnel on, SSH 5901 that stays open all the time. And from that, I can locally navigate to it, as you see here. I also set up keys, but this is my server in itself, or I'm sorry, my VM in itself. It's just for access, but it is internal on the same subnet as it has its public IP, of course, but it's on the same subnet as all of my infrastructure for within Azure, and that way I can access and do tests and stuff like that. So this is just the SSH into that, and that's the other one. And as I showed you before, once the CLI is installed on your local machine, as well as Helm and kubectl, you can actually use these commands here, as you see, in order to access Jira just as you would, or that Kubernetes cluster install, the same as you would be, logging in over SSH, right? You're going to your install directory or your configuration directory, and this is just showing you what I had in there. I just quick, ls. I can go up the directory. It's basically mounting the drives, the shared volumes that I use, the shared storage classes and volumes that I had with that. And then I can access it as necessary. Of course, you'd want to make sure you're connected to the shared volume versus the local volume. Local volume gets rewritten every time, but as the machine goes up and down, the shared volume stays consistent. So all of your configuration files are primarily under the shared volume. Other than that, have fun. I just wanted to show you. Oh, and here's the, I also, created using Tiger VNC, just logged into my Ubuntu machine. It handles just like that. I got PG4 admin running on, or PG admin 4 running on this to access my database, or even locally, I can do it from my SSH on my local machine or within a terminal here. As you can see, the same stuff runs. There's that DB environment set. So .wac DB, and then it just logs me right into pSQL. As you can see, I'm connected to the CLA Jira Prime database as necessary. So those are just some endpoints and ways to get into that after completion, do some testing. If you guys have any, I have a ton of other links that I've installed or that I've set up as well. Those links being listed off here, but just everything that I had to study in order to get this operational and figure out how it all works, not being familiar with it at all, but then also different configuration tricks that I learned and some of the websites. If you guys want more information, please reach out to me. It's jesse.christoffel@valiantis.com. Other than that, have a great day. Take care.